Reviewing amendments, creating amendment lists, and recording outcomes, Scotland. This is a demonstration on what the interface for a new drafting and amending tool could look like. It demos what functionality and key concepts will be included as part of reviewing amendments submitted for lodging, creating the various amendment lists, and also recording the outcomes of amendments. This functionality will all be made available to Parliament clerks and not the drafting lawyers. I shall start from the dashboard. The user can go straight to amendments when they first log in from the dashboard by finding the relevant bill and selecting the Amendments button. This will load the Amendments tab, which lists all amendments that are used. To find out more about the functionality available on this wireframe, please view the Drafting and Managing Scottish Amendments screencast. Reviewing amendments. Whenever an amendment has been submitted from the PCO, a notification will be sent to the legislation team to let them know that a new amendment has been submitted for lodging. In these wireframes, we've represented this notification by way of a badge that appears on the Amendments tab. It also appears on the dashboard, so that you do not have to be within a project to see that a new amendment has been submitted. To view the submitted amendments, the user could click on the badge. This wireframe shows all amendments submitted which haven't been dealt with yet. The options for dealing with submitted amendments are Accept, which will be selected once the legislation office have performed their checks on the amendment content and format. Reject, which will be used if there is a reason why it cannot be accepted. If an amendment is rejected, the PCO would be able to resubmit it if it was a case of further updates required. On hold. This is to acknowledge that the amendment has been received, but there may be pending further action or checks before it can be accepted or rejected. To help with the checking process, the Parliament clerk will be able to do the following. If they want to see the traditional formatted amendment in more detail, they could show and hide this amendment within the amendment list. The first amendment in this list is an example of this show hide functionality. If the Parliament clerk wishes to see the amendment in line or wants to check all the amendment metadata, they could select the View Edit button. This would open the Amendment Editor window, which looks like this. They would see the detail of the amendment in line and all the associated metadata. Although not shown on the wireframes, there would probably need to be a flag to the Parliament clerk if the drafting lawyer had changed the traditional style amendment without the inline equivalent being updated. This would give them a prompt to check that the inline equivalent was the same as the traditional format, so that if the amendment was agreed to, it could be safely auto-inserted into the bill. There is an opportunity to add a comment against each amendment. This comment will only be visible by Parliament clerks. It could be used to capture what checks have been done or what piece of information is outstanding if it is on hold. There is also a date-time option. This overrides the system date timestamp that was set at the time the amendment was submitted. Parliament clerks can either accept, reject, or put amendments on hold one by one, or by using the checkboxes alongside each amendment and using the bulk actions. It is also possible to create a list of one or more selected amendments if required. Finally, there is an option to filter this list of amendments if there were a lot submitted at one time, for example. These filters include filtering by member. You can optionally include that member if they were listed as a supporter. You might want to search by amendment type, but following user testing, this wasn't popular. Amendment status, which isn't relevant in this context, as only amendments that appear in this list will be submitted or on hold. You can also filter by topic if this is a function that you or someone in your team has used. If the drafting lawyer decided to make their topics public, you would be able to see their topics as filter options as well. You can choose to filter by stage. The default view will be for the current stage, but it will be possible to view amendments for a previous or even future stage. You can also filter by section or schedule if you want to see all amendments for a particular provision. You might want to filter the list by date. And finally, you might wish to filter by party, which will rely on this information being derived from the member who lodged the amendment. Once the amendments have been accepted, they will be visible in the amendment list. These lodged amendments will now be ready for inclusion on an official amendment list, which brings us on to creating official amendment lists. This tab is where users should come when they want to view a published list or if they want to create an amendment list. There are two types of amendment list. An official amendment list, in this case daily lists, marshal lists and groupings. These are produced by the Legislation Office during the amendment process. These lists will not be available to drafting lawyers in the PCO. The other type of list is the ad hoc lists. These look very similar to the official amendment lists and use a very similar process, including the use of the order of consideration. However, it will be clearly marked that these are not official copies of the amendment lists. Ad hoc lists can be created by any user. It is intended that this screen will display all lists that have been produced, defaulting to the current stage. Drafting lawyers in the PCO will only be able to view published official amendment lists. They will not be able to see an amendment list that is currently being drafted by Parliament clerks. On this page, the user can perform the following actions. They can create a new list, according to which one they would like to do. They can view a list in read-only format if you are a drafting lawyer viewing a published official list. And they can create an order of consideration. This will be used by the system to order the amendments that appear in any of the lists if an order of consideration was selected. I will show you how an order of consideration could work. This table allows users to specify the order in which the bill will be considered. At the bottom will be a list of previous orders of consideration if the order was to change at any point during the stage. To specify an order, the user will use the drop-downs and free text fields. To build up the order, adding more layers as required, add another Order button. The system will present a preview of the order of consideration as the user constructs it. Once a user is happy with the order of consideration, they can save it, which will return them to the list management page. I will now demonstrate how creating an amendment list could work by creating a new marshalled list. How each list is created will depend on certain rules built into the system for each list. For example, when beginning the marshalled list creation process, the system will present to the user a list of all amendments that have already appeared on any previous daily lists, either from the start of the current stage or since the last marshalled list was created. If not all amendments were dealt with on the marshalled list, any without outcomes will also be presented in this list. The rules will be discussed and agreed in more detail when development begins, but this gives an insight into what the system can do. On this page, the user has the flexibility to remove any amendments that they do not want to include in this list by using the checkboxes. They also have the opportunity to specify the order of consideration if they haven't done so already. When they are sure they have all the amendments they need and have specified the order of consideration, they will click on Generate Marshalled List. The system will ask the user to confirm what order they want to apply the amendments. Order of the bill. This is the default order that sections and schedules appear in the bill. For example, when a particular section called a schedule, the schedule would appear after the relevant section. Date and time. This applies to the date and time that amendments were lodged, so that the one lodged earliest came first. And order of consideration. This will use the most recent order of consideration. Once the user has specified the order they want to apply, the system will automatically sort the selected amendments and present them back to the user in a list. At this point, the user can do any last-minute adjustments to the order by dragging and dropping the amendments into their preferred order. To satisfy the requirement to add certain bits of rubric to handle various exceptions, the user can view the marshalled list in the editor window, which will allow them to add extra rubric as required, but without editing the actual amendments themselves. Although not shown on this wireframe, there will need to be functionality to allow the Parliament clerk to publish the amendment list when they have finished with it. Once the amendments have been voted on, the outcome should be recorded on the system. This could happen in situ in the committee or chamber, or afterwards, as is currently the process. When the user clicks on Record Decision Outcome tab, the system will load all amendments appearing on the most recent marshalled list, including any manuscript amendments which do not already have an outcome recorded against them. Against each amendment, there is a drop-down of all possible outcomes. There is also an opportunity to record vote information against each amendment, including whether or not there was a casting vote. Once the user has completed recording the decisions against each amendment, any recorded as agreed to will be ready to apply to the revised version of the bill. This will be covered in the screencast for applying amendments to a bill. This is the end of the Creating Amendment Lists and Recording Outcomes screencast.